Ever since I was like 12 or 13 years old, I have been very much dedicated to finding my own personal style. At that age, I realized just how much I love the color black. So I basically dedicated my whole wardrobe to the color black. I found my style identity pretty early. Lace, the color black, mesh, romantic detailing while still keeping some sort of utility edge to it. And soon enough, because of this distinct style identity that I have carried with me ever since I was a teenager, people have just associated it with me. So much so that when I started experimenting with it, people I knew from high school or middle school literally texted me and were like, "Since when do you wear color?" As if it wasn't just a red scarf that I was wearing all of a sudden. And this whole situation, this whole personal experience really made me think about, am I being inauthentic by experimenting with color, by deviating from the style that I've built over the past couple of years? And that's why I kind of got onto a little curiosity spiral about what authenticity even is, and why do people always seem like they're chasing it? In order to understand better what authenticity even is, I first looked at the linguistic definition of authenticity. Based on a Cambridge dictionary, authenticity refers to the quality of being real or true, with synonyms being under no illusion, absolute reality, and truth. And that intrigued me very much because one of the qualities I would say many people, myself included, associate with authenticity is consistency, but not in a sense of coherence, but in a sense of stagnation almost, in a sense of unchangedness almost. And that reminded me of a philosophy that I've read about quite a couple of times before, that basically, in summary, says that people change and grow always. It's almost as if change is the only constant variable in life. Authenticity almost acts as some sort of social currency of trust, since authenticity very much affects people's judgments and behaviors towards you. Depending on how authentic someone views you to be, they can view you as more moral, and therefore more valuable and more trustworthy. And this trust today does not only act as a currency of trust, but as a sort of economic capital, where I think our initial thought about authenticity being real and true, which does not automatically mean that it needs to be unchanged, becomes very interesting, is when we look at George Herbert Mead's idea, saying, quote, "The self is formed through reflected social images." This quote in and of itself suggests that authenticity, so the expression of the self, is relational and not absolute. The questions I asked myself in the beginning about my personal style, if I was still being true to myself by experimenting with it, was not me questioning my authenticity. It was me questioning my personal branding, the box that I put onto myself by being so recognizable. Finding yourself, finding your authentic self has always been a quest within human nature, I would say. Today's day and age where people can become brands, the line, I would say, though, is blurring between authentic self expression and wanting to stay true to a brand. The similarity between the two, why I think we confuse them so often, is that both of them build a sense of trustworthiness. Branding builds trust via recognizability and familiarity, which both are factors that rely very much on linearity. Authenticity, though, relies on one factor only, and that is truth. Truth does not have to be linear. It feels as if we are confusing two very different processes, one of change and one of unchangedness. In order to hopefully find our authentic self, which is quite humorous in and of itself, but that would open a totally different conversation again. Is our truth the same as someone else's truth? Is truth subjective or objective? And I feel like that is especially what makes it so humorous that people look for boxes to find their own authentic self. To name examples of such boxes are today's aesthetics, or humanity's tendencies to group things together that are similar. I believe the reason us humans do that is because uncertainty is very scary to us. So, grouping things into something that is already understood, such as an archetype or an aesthetic, makes something much less scary. Of course, I understand that you have to start your quest somewhere for authenticity and aesthetics, so building taste, building your own visual language can very much help with that. But I think it really turns unfavorable for self expression when we stick to it in an unchanged way and we don't allow change to happen anymore. It's almost as if we would freeze ourselves. I've been mainly talking about the tension between the lived self and the branded self, but I here also want to acknowledge that even people who are not part of the public life or in a sense of have not made a brand out of themselves also encounter tension, not between their branded self and their lived self, but between their lived self and their social self. The social self is the self that you present to other people. And as we've heard from George Herbert Mead's idea that the self is formed through reflected social images, you can very much see that the lived self and the social self influence each other. The social self is the self that we present to others. And similarly to the branded self, they both require, or at least expect, some sort of consistency, which, just as before, clashes with the reality of the lived self that is ever evolving. After mapping this, the question that has primarily evolved as a new one is whether authenticity is stability or simply coherence across transformation, and whether or not we really have to freeze our evolution in order to keep our trustworthiness with our peers. In case this episode got you curious about the topic, all my sources for this video are linked in the description box down below, as well as some other relational sources that you can feel free to explore in order to expand your map on this question. This was my map for today's episode, and I hope you enjoyed today's little thought nudge. See you again the next time. The end.